It has been a quiet summer, at least since the expedition. I've had the pleasure of seeing a number of papers published in various scientific journals detailing some of the more sensational findings from the Labyrinth coast. Charlotte even had an accolade or two, which she seems more than satisfied with. As for me, I've been busy enough with analyzing the samples from that strange realm. Even so, at this point, such matters are more or less at a close. At least unless I'm prepared to revisit the locale, which isn't feasible without a sizable crew of professionals. Normally, this halcyon state of things wouldn't be so bothersome, but alas, Charlotte has been increasingly ill at ease. She's an indispensable sort in the wild, but without a bit of adventure in her life, she soon becomes quite restless. Recently, I spoke with her regarding this restlessness. It seems she was quite taken with some of the larger monstrosities from the expedition and expressed a desire to see such unearthly giants once again. This gave me an idea. There is another liminal biome that, until recently, had been out of my reach. However, with my more recent connections, I believe I could arrange a simple expedition. I will have to act quickly, though, as that particular realm becomes off-limits at summer's end. Regrettably, my current options are still somewhat limited. It is with some reluctance that I have written to one of the colleagues from the Labyrinth Coast expedition. He had expressed some interest in further collaboration. The realm I hope to bring Charlotte to is another low-gravity liminal biome. As such, the fauna can grow quite large and imposing. I will admit I have been interested in exploring the place for quite some time now. I have a theory to test, but I'll worry about the details after securing passage. The biome is one of the oldest of the known liminal realms, or rather, it was found by human explorers quite a long time ago. With over 1,000 years of intermittent visitations within recorded history, the place has gathered a number of different names. Personally, my favorite of these is probably the Drakenbriar. The Drakenbriar is a large and surprisingly varied liminal biome. It contains 4 basic zones with slight degrees of overlap. Nearest to the reality threshold is an expansive plateau with an Arctic climate. This high plateau is inhabited by a number of large grazers, apparently of Archosaur descent. After at least 20 kilometers, this plateau begins to give way to the second zone, commonly referred to as the Crags. The crags consist of a labyrinthine network of narrow canyons, jagged rock formations, and twisting caverns. The region is geologically active, and several volcanic springs can be found within the area. These eventually converge into a series of small rivers that run down from the plateau into an expanse of marshy lowlands. This expanse is the third zone, known to most as the Twisting Forest. The forest is characterized by a preponderance of highly contorted trees, most of which are actually giant forms of lycophyte. Flowering plants are a rarity here. Fog and mist are quite common in this region, in part due to a worrisome abundance of geothermal springs. Some of the local plant species have adaptations to harvest water from the air via condensation. Many of the larger animal species are quite impressive. Collectively known as draconids, these vertebrate tetrapods appear to blend mammalian and reptilian features. The fourth zone is defined by increasingly severe geological activity, with frequent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The sky is often clouded by falling ash, and there are a number of barren expanses of hardened basalt. The vegetation here is characterized by an oddly aggressive tenacity, taking the form of twisting briars and brambles. One of the most common names for this region is the Hell of Thorns. It has been a busy week since my previous entry. I'm writing from the hold of a ship off the northwest coast of Caledonia. Thankfully, this part of the journey is nearly at a close, as I can already feel the vessel slowing to dock. It seems we have reached our destination at long last. It is a small, rather desolate island, little more than a crag of rock jutting up from the troubled sea. I managed a rough sketch while I was up on deck in desperate search of fresh air. If anything, there was too much air as the wind nearly tore both pencil and paper from my grasp several times. Still, I managed to find a sheltered enough spot for at least a quick drawing. No doubt I'll have to elaborate on it later. The seas have been rough enough to leave me feeling quite sick for most of this maritime voyage. In contrast, Charlotte seems blissfully unaffected by such motion sickness. As for the third member of our little band, I could only speculate. He tends to keep such concerns to himself. I should probably note here that it is common practice for liminal travelers to employ pseudonyms as a matter of basic precaution. This has been the case ever since certain regrettable instances with the Fey courts, but that is another story for another time. Our patron for this venture has chosen the name of Professor Tobias. Charlotte and myself have taken to simply calling him Toby. He has yet to show whether this pleases or annoys him. It is later now, though not by much. We stepped onto the island without incident and were led into a rather unremarkable cave near its center. I felt the familiar tension of a gate ahead, that almost indescribable sense of space twisting and warping about oneself. Then there was the faint sense of falling sideways as we passed through. My footsteps feel considerably lighter now, as the gravity reduction is noticeable even this close to the threshold. I'm currently within a sort of fortress within the cavern beyond the gate. This place functions both as a security checkpoint and a supply station, vital for those who intend to step out into the realm beyond. It seems hospitable enough, though the handful of people working here seem quite surprised to see us. Apparently it is very close to the end of the season now, and they are more accustomed to seeing people leaving rather than arriving. It serves as a reminder that time is short. At least I have a clear enough idea of where I'm going. In addition to the customary guides and explorer manuals, I have brought a small copy of a rather esoteric text, a collection of myths said to originate from some of the earliest Nordic settlements within the Drakenbriar. Alas, these settlements are long since abandoned, and even this collection was compiled at least a few hundred years after the proper accounts were first set down. Even so, I might hope for some useful clues within the pages. At the very least, it should provide some potential entertainment as we travel. For tonight, though, I will be reviewing the more formal and scholarly notes regarding the High Plateau. With any luck, we'll be setting out tomorrow morning without incident. The High Plateau is a region of Arctic tundra located nearest to the threshold within the Drakenbriar liminal biome. During the summer months, this plateau is populated by a number of large grazing species of apparently Archosaurian lineage. To call them dinosaurs would be something of a misnomer, though they do appear to be direct descendants of these infamous reptiles. Most are characterized by thick coats of insulation with a generally drab coloration. This appears to confer protection against the cold and camouflage against aerial predation. During the colder months, the high plateau becomes effectively uninhabitable, and these grazers retreat deeper into the biome. They overwinter in a state of semi-hibernation within a series of narrow valleys and cave systems most often referred to as the crags. Despite the harshness of the climate, it is relatively stable within a geological timeline. Thus, the region has acted as a surprising refuge for lineages that vanished during mass extinction events. Most of the high plateau inhabitants appear to be survivals from the Cretaceous era. At first light, our trio finally emerged into the open air of the high plateau. We had purchased the necessary attire, which consisted mainly of heavy furs laced with a number of chemical substances. These are meant to serve as repellents against the Arctic mosquito population, as well as larger winged menaces. Their content is interesting to me, but alas, it appears to be a closely guarded secret among the organizations that manage this biome. While the place seemed much like any other span of desolate tundra, there were a few odd differences. Of course, the reduced gravity is one such difference, and it has done wonders for our carrying capacity. Each of us is able to carry several weeks' worth of specialist rations, which is just as well. Deeper into the biome, nearly everything appears to be either poisonous or essentially inedible for humans. To a practiced eye, there are a few other differences evident. Many of the plants here look like brown dead grass. However, a closer inspection reveals something more akin to bryophytes, filled with tannins and carotenoids that make them look dead, even when they are quite thoroughly alive. Alongside this, there are a number of pale greenish shrubs. One might expect them to be woody plants, but actually these are gigantic relatives of the more mundane lichens commonly known as reindeer moss. Such fare isn't much good for humans, but the resident animals seem quite healthy. Our first notable encounter was with a foraging herbivore. The creature was bipedal, and at a glance it looked a bit like an emu that had developed a pathological case of fluffiness. It seemed quite curious and almost charming in its demeanor as it investigated us. Charlotte appeared to be quite taken with it, while Toby was somewhat less enthused. A distant sound abruptly caught the creature's attention, and its fuzzy form suddenly elongated as it stretched its neck out to survey the surroundings. It gave us one last quick glance before proceeding to run off at remarkable speed. This particular species is usually known as a Lekare within the more scholarly circles. The name is an anglicized version of the Old Norse word for what is essentially something like a wandering fool or a minstrel. Among the more hands-on explorers of the biomes, it's apparently known by the unflattering name of Fuzzlewhomp. This name, of course, refers to its thick coat of downy insulation, as well as a rather devastating defense mechanism. Apparently, it has a remarkably damaging kick. Thankfully, its demeanor and temperament usually mean that humans are spared from a direct demonstration. As Charlotte asked what else I'd read about the Fuzzlewhomp, I decided to try telling one of the old stories as we walked. As it turns out, nearly all of the myths that focus on the local wildlife prominently feature a wandering madman known as Oddvar the Strange. I couldn't help but feel a sort of sympathy for this hapless character at times. It was a cold summer day when Oddvar wandered the open waste, munching on lichen as he walked, wrapped in his usual cloak of tattered fur. What he sought this day nobody knew, least of all him. Yet on he walked beneath open sky and over open ground. In time, he chanced upon a doleful Lekare who seemed every bit as lost as he was. Moreover, the beast was quite despondent, its long neck drooping as it kicked idly at the ground. "Why so gloomy?" Oddvar asked the creature. It regarded him with its large, sad eyes. "The summer is nearly spent, and I've found no companion to warm me through the winter." "A sad state, to be sure," said Oddvar, "but why should you be left alone?" The beast let out a mournful sigh. "I cannot dance," it replied. "I have no steps that draw the eye." Oddvar laughed and raised an arm. "Then dance with me a while." He began to dance, a most clumsy and deranged sort of motion. A drunken spider might have had more grace, but he smiled all the same. The Lekare began to laugh at this display, and then began to dance as well. At first it was no less clumsy than Oddvar, but soon its steps improved. In time it was quite the sight to behold, and all the while Oddvar danced along in his ridiculous manner. Another Lekare approached and stared dumbfounded at the scene. Yet while she laughed at Oddvar's antics, she seemed quite taken with the grace of his dance partner. Soon enough, and all too soon, the two of them began to dance together, leaving Oddvar to flail about on his own. As he saw his friend was no longer left alone, Oddvar began to dance subtly away. They scarcely noticed as he slipped off, to wander further on out in the open, munching on lichen as he walked, wrapped in his cloak of tattered fur. After a full day of walking, we've at last found our way to one of the old keeps. These are relics from the initial Nordic settlements, maintained and in many cases restored for modern use by explorers. All three of us were glad to get indoors as the sun was setting. Winter feels entirely too close already, even if summer isn't quite over with yet. Only a few people were present in the keep, mostly staff by the look of things. They all seemed eager to be leaving the biome for the winter. With such a relative lack of company, we had our choice of accommodations, plenty of rooms to settle into. Charlotte is in good spirits and seemed quite entertained by the tale of Oddvar and the dancing Fuzzlewhomp. She asked if there was anything to the dancing or if that was all simple absurdity. In truth, these odd creatures are known for having courtship dances much like those found in certain types of bird. This grain of truth seemed to pique her interest all the more. I'll have to try telling a few more of the stories as we go. Toby was his usual disinterested self, at least as far as such tales are concerned. This is thankfully to my advantage. Still, he does have rather keen interests in other things, such as the purpose of this trip I requested his aid for. He scarcely lets me forget that he is essentially funding this expedition and as such expects to be brought in on my plans. Fortunately, I did have an answer prepared. It might even be true. I brought his attention to some of the more grisly folktales of the Hell of Thorns and its resident creatures. I believe there may be an as yet undocumented symbiosis between the briars and certain varieties of lindworm within their range. Toby seemed quite captivated by this idea and began taking notes as I outlined these theories. This appears to have galvanized the man, and I expect that tomorrow will start quite early for all of us.